Compliance. That's what we're going to talk about today. Just give you a quick intro. My name is Vivian Mee. I'm founder of VM Group, so we're a cybersecurity and digital forensics company. So we would help organisations get themselves on the journey of compliance, get them, I suppose, identify what they need to be compliant to in terms of scope, and then from there help them along the journey, whether it's setting up their incident response, their supply chain, or just even from the ground zero, writing their policies, procedures, controls, etc. So that's who I am. Today I'm joined by Richard and by Jamie. Both are going to talk about compliance as well. So yeah, and that would be after 2 minutes of talking, of me talking anyway. So the logistics really is, obviously I'm going to talk for the next 10-15 minutes, then we've got Jamie, then we're going to do a Q&A session. If anyone has got any questions during any of the talks, we've all decided that we're happy to be stopped. We can have the chat. We've got 2 people on mics here at the front. We've got Chelsea and Grissamar, so just put your hands up and they'll run around with the mic if anyone has a question. So once I'm finished speaking, we've got sorry, what's my roadmap? Yeah, we've got Richard first from Impossible Cloud, and then we've got Jamie from Fortra, both Q&A afterwards, and then we'll stay around at the end. And if you want to then maybe run out the door and go down to their stands, we all have stands down in the main hall as well. So, compliance. Who works in compliance in the audience? Do you know what okay, we've got a few hands. Everyone knows what compliance is, yeah? Do we have DORA people? Okay, NIS2. We'll talk about other ones then, GDPR. Everyone should be putting their hands up for that nearly. Okay, so look, compliance can mean anything. We've got a lot of standards, frameworks, regulations coming at us at the moment, and I know DORA and NIS2 are the 2 that are really being pushed at us at the moment. My views are on them, if you are across a multiple that you need to be compliant, pick one that is going to cover most of what your scope is. And I know that sounds a bit odd if you're like, well, I have to be DORA and I have to be NIS2. There's a lot of overlap. So look at the controls, make sure that what you have in terms of your controls actually map onto both or all, okay? I suppose the journey of becoming compliant. Number 1, you have to identify your scope, okay? So are you an essential person? So this, I'm thinking of NIS2 here. So are you essential or are you an important supplier? Or do you know, like, suppose people in the audience that have already put up their hands for NIS2, and I do remember faces quite well, so if you want to answer, do you know your scope and have you identified your scope? No answers. Okay, I'm not going to embarrass you, it's okay, I'll not point. Okay, identify your scope. If you're a DORA, maybe you're a financial provider, an ICT provider to a financial entity, obviously you're going to be DORA compliant. Again, that's got to do with financial risk, operational resilience, your third-party suppliers. NIS2 is more about the board. It's more about cyber risk. So the key thing, I think, for both of them is actually board governance. So once you've got your scope identified, obviously you're going to have to then, before I move on to even the board, if you're unsure of your scope, so if you think you're not under NIS2, but maybe you are, but you're not sure. The NCSC website actually has a questionnaire that you can fill out pretty quickly, 5-10 minutes. Answer that and it will tell you what you are. So if you don't know, so ncsc.ie, I think. If you don't know, I can get it for you later on. So the next point, I suppose, then is think about board governance. So I know from my legacy, like from my years, I'm working in cyber over 20 years now at this stage, and it was always a challenge to get budget for cyber. It was always a challenge to get budget for software security or cybersecurity projects. Those conversations, unfortunately, are still happening in some parts of the industries. I know for us, even, for example, we've got some clients where we'd give them, okay, this is your roadmap, this is what you need to do. Oh, no, that's not in the budget, and that'll never be in the budget. And I'm like, well, you're now going to be under the NIS2, or you're now DORA regulated, so you have to. So the board do need to know what regulations or what compliance, where they need to be compliant. They have to have oversight and approve. And I think that's one of the key things of the changes in a lot of the compliance frameworks that are out there now. It's not just blame the head of IT or the CISO or the cybersecurity expert. It is actually now the board. They're very much responsible now. So they should be given opening the purse strings. They should be asking you what budget you need for cyber, what are the risks, and approve risks. So if they decide, no, we're not going to give you a budget for this project, but tell us what the risks are, they have to approve that they're going to accept those risks in the organisation. And then they also then have to identify who's accountable for all of these risks as well. So those are questions that probably never were at board level before. They were probably questions that it was the IT person constantly battling, constantly saying, we need this project, we need vulnerability management, we need to know where our risks are within the infrastructure. And people say, oh, just fix it, it'll be fine, just patch it. They didn't really understand the risks, but I think it's getting more and more predominant now. Everyone knows someone that's been hit with ransomware. Everyone knows someone that has been hacked at some point, and everyone, it's probably, I know there's the panel later on, is about what keeps CISOs awake at night, and I do honestly think it is actually threat actors now. It is actually it is that, I don't think, they were trying to push sustainability in there for a while, and I don't want to say something on PC, but I do think cybersecurity is a bit, okay, I better not say that, there's a few people smiling. Cybersecurity should keep CISOs awake at night, because they think they could be really, really patched. They have the best cybersecurity programs in place. They've got the best systems. They could have one configuration wrong. There could be a zero-day exploit. There could be something there that will actually let those attackers in, and someone has forgotten about something. I was working with a client recently where they're a fintech company. They're not regulated. They don't have to abide by anything, so they say. But I spoke to the CISO or the CEO, and I mentioned to them, do you know that half of your documents are actually up in the dark web from last week? No. Okay, let's go and check, see where they came from. They couldn't find how they got in. They actually had hacked, not the legacy system, the previous legacy system that was supposed to be switched off back in 2012, and it hadn't been. So that's how they got caught out, which is very unfortunate for the CEO. He's like, okay, what budget do you need now? And it's not about budgets, it's about, again, making sure you have your control. So going back then into compliance, the next part, obviously you've got your board, they've got the attention, they know that they're going to have to spend some money, they know that they are now responsible, they do know that it's got a lot, it's not more than just reputational damage, it could be fines down the road. Should we know that the DPC has been sending or giving fines to some organisations? The UK is very prominent, a lot more than Ireland. But the other regulators are going to start following suit. So that's going to happen. Haven't heard of any yet. I don't know if anyone's heard of any fines. No? No? Okay. I'm still in tune, so. The next piece then is probably to set up your risk management framework. If anyone doesn't know what that is, basically you need to get your policies, your ICT policies and procedures in place. You have to identify your critical systems. You have to identify them from a risk perspective. If one system goes down, is that going to affect your organisation or not? Incident reporting then is probably the next strongest piece. So incident response is very much my area, and some of my team as well here. Basically when things go wrong, you need to make sure that you're able to report. And that's not just about getting your IT provider or your IT team on board and finding how the hacker got in. It's actually, who do I have to report to? Do I have to tell the Gardaí? Do I have to tell the regulator? How quickly do I have to tell the regulator? When does that 72-hour window start? Is it when I think I've been hacked, or when I know I've been hacked? Or is it when I know the data's been exfiltrated out? I would always go, well, if you think you've been hacked and you've got a little slight bit of evidence that you have been hacked, that's when you tell them. You let them know we have had an incident, and we will come back to you with the finer detail, because it does take time sometimes to go through what has happened, especially when you don't know if your legacy system is still there from 2012. So it can take a few weeks, and they can be very, very accommodating and giving you time as well. And I know that from the Data Protection Commissioner. The next area then is probably business continuity. So everyone knows what business continuity is, disaster recovery, making sure everything's there, but also testing it as well, making sure it actually works. It's great to say that I have a lovely backup system and it's all working, and then as soon as you want to file when it's been deleted by accident, or that your entire server's been encrypted with ransomware, you need to be able to restore it as well, and that has to be tested. Third parties, they seem to be getting a lot of focus at the moment, because everyone, obviously, you've engaged with a third-party supplier. Who are they engaging with? So have you a full I suppose, view and vision of exactly who is your supply chain? So we all know of the organisations that, like I know if Super Value was one where they were given free holidays and they got hacked, but it wasn't actually them, it was their supplier, but they were the ones that got the blame. So that's basically what they're trying to avoid. It's also then, I suppose, to ensure that the supplier and the supply chain can actually still fulfill your needs. So if they are doing a key critical service for you, are they able to actually still function? Have they got security controls in place? Have they got resilience and so forth? Then it's moving on to security controls. Yeah, you can put the best firewalls in, make sure it's configured correctly. You have to make sure you have the proper programs in place for your organisation. I'm not going to tell you what firewall to put in, but everyone has to assess themselves. And then obviously that's where you come in terms of your risk assessments and your gap analysis and so forth to be able to get you to the next level. And then once you think you're over the line and you're definitely compliant, you need to evidence it. So you need to make sure that you maintain your evidence for all of your controls that you've just put in place. You have to make sure you've got your policies. You've got to make sure that you've got your minutes of your meetings, especially that board meeting that is very critical for certain regulations. And then the risk register as well. Make sure that's updated too. Any questions so far? No? I have a quick overview of a roadmap of if someone was embarking it. So to say you can get compliant in 100 days, I don't actually believe that myself because I've been in the weeds. But in a typical organisation, a small organisation, they could potentially get to compliance in 100 days. And the roadmap for the first 30 days could just be your scope assessment, do a gap analysis from a cybersecurity perspective, do a board briefing, present to the board where you are in terms of whatever regulation you want to go for, whether it's DORA, NIS2, and then identify your compliance owners. That could all be done in the first 30 days. Once you get past the 30 days, day 30 to day 60, you start compiling your risk register. Get your risk register up to date from all areas of your business. Your suppliers, get a full inventory of your suppliers so you know exactly who, and to get that, maybe it's finance teams you need to go to, maybe it is your suppliers you need to ask them, is there anyone else supplying, are you subcontracting, I'm trying to say, any of the services to others? Incident response plans, they could be definitely put in place in the following 30 days. A BCP review and a policy review. So now we're at day 60, you should be starting to take good shape. In the 90 to 100 day window, that's where you start looking at the controls that you already have and you start remediating it. So from your gap analysis, you've identified some of your risks and some of your areas that you need to go through. So you look at your control remediation, you look at your contracts with your suppliers and with maybe your customers. So maybe have you agreed to something that really you shouldn't have because you're now opening either a can of worms or you can never deliver or you shouldn't actually be delivering to them anyway. Tabletop exercises, I'm a fan of those. I think they're the best, especially from an incident response perspective for even your non-technical people. Get the board into the room. You're in the middle of a ransomware attack. What do we do? Do we buy the Bitcoin? You'd be surprised what answers you get. Tabletop exercise at least twice a year. So when something does happen, it's not about, oh God, what's the policy? What are we going to do? It should be on the cuff. People are under pressure. People are thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? They panic. If you do tabletop exercises enough, they'll definitely be able to cover it. Your evidential pack, review it, and then an internal audit. There's 100 days done, and you should be compliant. So that's a quick roadmap. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to pass you over to Richard from Impossible Cloud. And you're going to talk about, sorry, I did have it. You have a cloud reality check debunking 5 myths that create compliance risk. So.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today. My name is Richard. I am the Channel and Distribution Manager with Impossible Cloud. For those who don't know, Impossible Cloud are Europe's leading provider of S3 cloud storage. Now, we're obviously talking about policies today, and compliance isn't always perhaps the most riveting conversation. Luckily, cloud storage is even worse. Okay, so I might not be able to make this sexy, but hopefully we can make it really interesting. What we're going to do today is just keep this quite concise, but we'd love to have input. Any questions that you might have, please don't hesitate to kind of get involved, pop a hand up and we'll get a mic to you. And we're going to break down some sort of key myths around the cloud space and compliance and how we can actually help attain some of those aspects. So I thought I'd start by quickly setting the scene, particularly around the use of cloud services. Our reliance on cloud services is kind of ever growing. And the figures from a recent study are quite eye-opening, really. So 67% of cloud services, 67% without cloud services business operations would grind to a halt. 64% of companies feel forced to use cloud services because software is the only way that they've actually been offered this service. And 53% of organizations feel at the mercy of cloud providers regarding security, pricing, and contract terms. And what this is doing is just highlighting our reliance on cloud services, but equally what we're doing to make sure that these services are properly protected. It's worth also noting, because we're speaking about data today, a final stat, and that is that data levels are increasing naturally by about 25 to 27% year on year. And what this means is, for a company, just on average growth, through natural means, data levels will have doubled within a 3-year period. So everything has doubled in terms of cost, management, and security around those sides of things. So let's dive into things, and with myth number 1. So if data is stored in European or UK data centres, it's automatically sovereign. Quick hands up on this one. So who thinks that just storing data in a European data centre or UK data centre makes that a sovereign service? Very good. It's a good start. So this is one of the most common misconceptions, in that sovereignty is all about location. It's absolutely not. So sovereignty is about retaining control of your data. It's more of a question of architecture and governance over and above a simple pin in the map. So sovereignty, sovereignty comes down to three key points. Firstly, control, assurance, and jurisdiction. And to be able to ensure sovereignty, you need to be able to clearly answer the following 3 questions. And the first of that is, who has access to my data? So data must be fully encrypted, and companies must manage their own encryption keys. Ideally, sort of bring your own key scenario, to ensure that nobody else has access to data from outside the company. Secondly is around where your data actually sits. So data should reside within the EU, and traffic should remain solely within European networks. Peering via EU backbones means that metadata isn't lost across US hubs, and that actually from a performance point of view, you're benefiting from lower latency. The final question then is, which laws apply? For those that don't know, the US Data Act is applicable to any US company, regardless of where they are geographically. So the US Data Act states that US Gov and authorities have access to all and any data held by any American data at any time. So if you are storing your data in Europe, but with a US company, you will be applicable to the US Data Act, and therefore, US Gov and authorities will have access to your data if and when they require that. By choosing a European company, you mitigate that risk completely, okay? And you're working with a European company, geofencing and retaining data within Europe. That is the key scenario or prime scenario for European companies. So myth number 2. European solutions can't compete on performance. This is a pretty outdated thought. Europe can absolutely outperform US providers, especially now ahead of US providers, I would say, for European companies. So sovereignty is a huge factor here because it actually brings performance as well as security. So from a performance perspective, we're able to minimize latency, and in doing so, increase speeds in terms of data transfer. Retaining your data within Europe for European companies means that they've got the shortest distance to travel for that information. Utilising dedicated European architecture ensures that all data only runs over European-only backbone and ensures that no data is being routed throughout the US. Again, from a compliance point of view, you know that you've got full governance and you've done everything within your control to ensure that your client's data and your own data is kept within the European framework. Secondly, solid architecture and multi-availability zones provided vast improvements in security and reliance in times of an emergency. So multi-availability zones will give you multiple access to your data if one of those zones was to go down. This means that, again, within your structured plans, you'll have redundancy if needed. Finally, how do we actually test whether we are performing as a European company against, let's say, US leaders or US historic leaders? We independently monitor and check our solution via an independent company, and we do that on a weekly basis. And what we've found over the last 8-9 months is that we're not just matching US companies, we're actually exceeding them in terms of performance, in terms of deliverability, and in terms of security reliability. The best way that we can actually put this forward and actually prove this to you, it's very easy for me to stand on stage here today and say how quick we are, how reliable we are, and how great we are. The best way to do it is to actually get you guys hands-on. So we'd be very happy to set up any trials if you actually would like to test things out at the end of this. So myth number 3. Cloud storage pricing doesn't matter, and the difference is minimal anyway. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily this is a compliance question, but it is debunking one myth. So at a first glance, you can see there are multiple companies offering fairly attractive price per terabyte cost rates, but these are often just the bait on hook or the headline act in terms of actually bringing you in and getting you interested in looking at that company. Storage costs can often look cheap, but actually there's a lot behind it in terms of hidden costs that they don't advertise and that aren't clear. So if we take egress fees, for example, egress fees are charged for when you download your data from the storage platform. And these, just in principle, we think are wrong. Okay, because I don't believe you should, or any company should be getting charged for accessing their data when they want to. My biggest frustration is that with egress fees, it prevents some people in moving away and creates this silent vendor lock-in. So, well, it's actually going to be a bit expensive for us to move, so maybe we'll park that one for now. Further down the line, your data has increased, those costs have increased, and actually the cost of moving is even higher. So it's one thing that I would advise after this is perhaps to check that total cost of ownership and understand your ability to be able to move. Additionally, API calls for data-intensive workloads especially, large numbers of small files and API requests can often exceed the actual cost of per terabyte rates. This is particularly applicable within the AI space. So actually minimizing and clarifying costs from that perspective is really important because those API costs can quickly outdo your overall costs. And finally, minimum retention period. So being able to store data for a given period of time is within your remit is incredibly important. With a lot of these companies, you are actually firmly stuck to a given period of time. So either 30 or 90 days, where you have to retain your data for that period. You need to be working with companies where you can access that data at any time without penalty. Funnily enough, the one thing we do provide is a very simple price per terabyte rate on storage. So we offer 0 egress fees, 0 API call charges, 0 minimum retention period on data. So very simply, the only cost that you will have with a solution such as ours is the price per terabyte rate. Myth number 4. cloud storage is a commodity. All providers deliver essentially the same thing. Now, this is absolutely not the case, but labeling yourselves as S3 compatible, I guess, does suggest that all of these services work in exactly the same way. But we spoke about aspects such as vendor, object lock and versioning. Previously, we talked about the threat of ransomware attacks, which is obviously on the up and is being brought into the mainstream media by multiple attacks for the last sort of 12 and 24 months. So having a fully ransomware-proof solution, so having is critical, and having an immutable backup allows you to do that. So when we're looking at any storage platforms, then having a fully immutable platform is now it's a given. It's a board level requirement, and it's something that you need to factor into any decision that you're making. Full S3 API compatibility. S3 API is the integration API which allows you to work with a plethora of different platforms. Why this is really important is because, again, you don't want to be locked into anything specific. Being S3 compatible means that you have the functionality and the ability to move your data to whichever S3 compatible platform you wish. So one thing it does give you is that freedom of choice. And finally, you often find that providers have multiple and fairly complex tiers of architecture. You could have cold storage, warm storage, lukewarm storage, archive storage, glacial, etc. But this can be pretty complicated, and when you've got multiple data sets that you're working with, then this can impact your ability to access that data, which is really important when you need to from a compliance perspective. So what we've done to improve from a compliance perspective is provide always hot single tier of storage, so you've always got immediate access to your data without penalty when you need it. And final one. So pure European providers aren't yet enterprise ready. This one bugs me a bit because I feel really passionate about European adoption. And that European solutions, particularly within Europe for European customers, is really important. Over the last, 18 months or so, we've seen a massive improvement and shift away from reliance on American providers to more European infrastructure. So from an architecture point of view, European companies now provide multi-availability zone architecture. We provide data replication. We provide all of the certifications that you require from that perspective. We spoke about the feature sets, so having fully immutable storage, having storage that has MFA, so multi-factor authentication, and identity access management is all key when talking about compliance and making sure you're ticking the boxes from that perspective. And from a compliance standpoint, operationally, European providers today comply with all of the international high standards, but also more specifically within the EU. So if we talk about ISO 27001 certification, SOC 2, NIS, DORA, PCI DSS, and EU and UK compliance. By using a European company to store your data, which is the most compliant heavy focus, it's going to be putting you on another tier in terms of ticking the boxes for compliance. So, a very brief summary from me, just around my thoughts on this area. So, I believe that NIS2 is accelerating the conversation around sovereignty, around resilience and accountability. So, understanding where your data sits, understanding who has access to that data, and understanding how that data is secured. Data residency alone is no longer enough. Okay, what we're looking for is true data sovereignty, and organizations must understand who actually has control over their data. Believe there is a genuine opportunity for MSPs to actually lead the conversation and instigate conversation around sovereign cloud and infrastructure. If you're able to talk to a client and put forward a European solution that is on par or or overtakes a US provider, why wouldn't that be a benefit for you? And for an MSP, that can provide really clear differentiation within a fairly crowded market. Cloud storage is now basic infrastructure. It's not particularly sexy, but it is core to everything that we do. So it's time to choose between having hyperscaler dependency or independent technical sovereignty. And it's important to do that sooner rather than later. That's me done. Are there any immediate questions at all?
I have one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could say that. No, you're in the hot seat. So you actually pointed out an interesting point about data in the US and the data, the Cloud Act, basically. Implications of the data from a GDPR perspective, are there any? What is it?
It's a very grey area. So again, just to clarify, if you're working with an American company, okay, regardless of where any data sits, you are applicable to the US Data Act, and they have access to your company's data and your client's data whenever they need to. What this means is, in theory, and I say in theory, they are GDPR compliant, but what you are doing is putting yourself at risk of legal exposure to US legal frames. So I don't want to stand here and say it's not GDPR compliant, because in theory it is. But if you're allowing access to different government organizations in different countries, and that is for all of your data, I'm not sure how that would be best practice in anything that you're doing.
So you're adding additional risks to your I suppose, your
Absolutely.
environment.
That's it. And when you're talking about your checklist and making sure that you've got a clear plan and roadmap in place, I'd be wanting to minimize any threats or potential threats that I have. And if I could put something forward to my board that says we're mitigating this risk with US Gov that could come at any time that is completely unbeknown to us, I'd be wanting to take that off the table and adopt a solution where I've got true data sovereignty. And by sovereign, I mean being in control of my data.
And sorry, I'm taking over the Q&A session, so if anyone has one question, put your hands up. But just to follow on from that, though, say you have got a SaaS provider or a solution in place, and they do say it's in an EU area, but you're not sure where the backups are. How can you check it? Can you ask them contractually? When do you have to have that conversation? Is it before your data goes there, before you write the contract, before you agree pricing? When?
You should be asking that question as your first question, prior to costings, prior to anything else. Where is my data held? Who has access? And those leading questions. Often, though, and I'm sure if we did a show of hands around, do you know which location or which data center your data is stored in? I'm sure there'd be a very clear split on who would actually know where the company data sits and who doesn't. What we give to every client is immediately when setting up, you have to choose where and which geographical zone you want your data stored in. And we can store different data in different geographical areas based on the requirements. So if you've got a head office in Dublin, but also got a satellite office in London, we have the satellite office storing data in the UK, which makes their data GDPR compliant for the UK. And the Dublin office would have the data stored within EU, and therefore being EU compliant.
We've got a question there in the middle, Grishma.
It's kind of a follow-on from that. So I was going down that road where we have our swim lanes sitting in Germany for that very reason. We didn't want to have it where they may be sitting in the UK, and there was potential changes in legislation to where they sit with GDPR over time. So we ensured that our swim lanes were in Germany. But if that's a SaaS product that's an American-owned company, it's sitting on a platform that's AWS or Azure, how do you avoid the US Act anyway? You know, at some point, it's going to fall into a US-led or US-owned company where the US Act has, you know, a permeability to it. Is that not the case?
So all of our infrastructure is our own, okay, and not sat on any AWS infrastructure.
Yeah,
I think that's what you're alluding to.
It is, but I'm saying if companies are using SaaS platforms for very, like you said, 67% of people feel they can't get a product unless it's SaaS-based. I'd say 70% of SaaS companies have a US component or a US parent company. So that data eventually has to be accessible by the US Act anyway.
I wouldn't disagree with you, and that's a really good point. Okay, what I would say is that the majority of your data and your customers' data that you retain and store on behalf of yourself or on behalf of your clients, that's the core focus. Okay, so it might be that your client is using Salesforce, okay, for example, and having their data there, but they wouldn't necessarily have access to their Salesforce integration necessarily. Okay, but if you're looking after their data, then because you're using an American platform, then they would, if that makes sense. So by segregating the two and adopting the data sovereignty piece in terms of the storage you hold, that's where the compliance improves. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? I would say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we have got Jamie from Fortra, and he's going to talk to us about cybersecurity for defence supply chain. So I'll leave it over to you.
Hello. Hey, there we go, there we go. It's always been a dream of mine, actually, to do the first session after lunch on compliance. So thank you for being part of that dream. First thing I feel I need to say is I work for an American company. Let's just get that out there. I think, before I get into my own stuff, I just want to remind you all about FIFA, and that's why the question on the US Data Gov was so pertinent. If the Americans want to come, they will come. That's that. They will just decide that it is in the interests or against the interests of an American company. They will run it through their Department of Justice, and that will give them jurisdiction. You saw it in FIFA. They will come. It's that simple. They'll roll straight over all of our laws because they can. And particularly with this current American administration that has the strangest world. Are there any Americans in the room, by the way? What I'm saying, that has the strangest view currently of what is and isn't within their purview. They'll come. So 977 days to go, though, apparently. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm responsible for defence globally and also for EMEA, for Fortra. I wanted to talk to you today. I didn't want to come here and sort of start telling you, cybersecurity professionals, a whole bunch of stuff about compliance, right? Simply because my end message, if anybody wants to scoot out, I'll just do the punchline now. Buy my stuff, you'll be more compliant, right? Because I'm a vendor, right? So let's be clear about what we're here to do. I wanted to talk to you about defence specifically, because this is the fastest growing part of our business. And some of you might be sitting down in the room thinking, defence? Why am I listening to a presentation on defence? It's not relevant for me. Bear with me, I'll get there. So the mission for Fortra is we look after, in the defence space, we're focused on the 50 allied nations. There are 32 nations in NATO. Quick poll. Is Ireland in NATO? No, no. No? Sure? Does Ireland have a tailored specific partnership with NATO for Ireland? Yeah. What does that give NATO and NATO partners access to within Ireland? It's definitely worth looking into what that gives NATO and America and other countries access to. So I want to walk you through what we do with these nations. I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I've been at Fortra 9 years, as I said, but I've been around doing this for 26 years. I want to ask another question. Is Ireland at war? Everyone's at war? Everyone, is Ireland at war, yes or no? Straightforward question. No. Yes by proxy. Your government thinks you're at war, right? Last year, your government believes there was somewhere between 300 to 400 nation-state attacks on Ireland. One of the major concerns of the Irish government, without being in some of these defence agreements, is if there is a direct attack on Ireland, who will help defend Ireland? In truth, it's going to be America, it's going to be NATO, it's going to be the United Kingdom. There's a whole series of data. But we are in the most precarious state. I am 28, 52, and I think this is the most precarious state the world has been in since the Berlin Wall. So while we might not be in a world war, we are most definitely a world at war. We wake up to the most peculiar things: Venezuela, Iran, potentially Cuba. Ukraine has been grinding on for God knows how long. So I got in trouble with this slide, by the way, last time, because it says Palestine war. There were some Israelis, and they didn't like the fact. It's not my slide, that's just what it said. I don't make no apologies for it. It's a conflict, it's a war, depends on who you ask in Gaza, but that's still grinding away, and in Lebanon. There are more conflicts going on in the war now than practically at any time. And it's being waged on new battlefields. They don't need your sons and daughters to go and fight. They can just turn off your mobile phones. They can just turn off your electricity. They can just get into your critical controls. They can just get into a substation and they can turn it on and off 36 times. Who knows what happens if you turn a substation on and off 36 times? It blows up. It blows, you build the charge and bang, it's gone. So let me move on. So Fortress cybersecurity solutions are already embedded in so many places. If you are not compliant in some of these things, Ireland as a broader nation, if these things escalate, you will simply be turned off from various things. You won't be able to maintain food security. You won't be able to maintain the internet if it becomes positioned that you are a risk to the rest of the allied nations, of which there are 50, which Ireland is classed as one. It's considered the bulwark of Western defence, by the way. So it is critically, strategically important. There's only one place considered more strategically important than Ireland in the first line of defence, and it's Iceland. So the link between Ireland and Iceland is absolutely critical. And the data pipes that are connect the two are really, really important. So we work on programmes, and Ireland currently are in a phase of the most ambitious rearming defence spending that they've done ever. It's almost €2 billion, which is significant for Ireland. Ireland are looking at procuring new armoured vehicles. They're also looking at procuring fighter jets. They're looking at small weapons. And all of these things, as is very similar to European nations, they're looking to purchase them from the nations that make them, primarily Turkey, America, the United Kingdom, but you're going to make them here because you want the jobs to be Irish jobs while these things are put together. So that brings a new level of compliance and a new level of opportunity for organisations across Ireland. But all of those organisations will have to be very clear about how they manage their data, where it comes from, who has access to it, how it's controlled at rest and in transit. Drone industry. Do you know that Ireland has one of the most vibrant drone industries in Europe? Did you know that? Do you know how many organisations there are in Ireland as of March that produce military and commercial drones, 94 organisations across Ireland. That's a significant amount. So, when we talk to organisations in the defence supply chain, there's 3 key areas that we tend to talk to them about where our products fit in, about how they meet the requirements, how they protect the intellectual property, and how they reduce the supply chain risks. We've already talked about it's not just your organisation, it's all the people that feed into your organisation. And one of the key things that we've been working on is a standard. Does everyone know what a STANAG is, by the way? So a STANAG, these are the sort of things that you're probably going to start to become more important, because these are the military grade standards that are starting to flow through government into sectors that is a brilliant ringtone, by the way. If you're going to be interrupted, it might as well be by something cool. I like that. No, it's cool, it's cool. So a STANAG is a NATO standard. So basically the NATO guys get together, they look at NIS, they look at DORA, they look at GDPR and CEXI and all that sort of stuff, and they go, right, what's the best of these? What fits for our defence capability? And then they bring them together like that, and they say, right, well, that's our STANAG. And if you overlaid all these compliance things, there's lots of similarity between the two. But if you don't adhere in certain, particularly governmental and critical national infrastructure, so we're starting to see this a lot more in the UK. If you don't adhere to these standards, you'll just be cut off from interacting with Five Eyes and all these sorts of NATO and all these other sorts of parties that we work with. So we're experienced in solving a particular set of problems. If you don't know the name Fortra, probably should have done this at the beginning. If you don't know the name Fortra, in 2017, we started acquiring lots of companies, and we put together a platform that secures data security and also deals with offensive tools. So the sort of companies that we own, that we've brought into our platform that you might have heard of, we acquired Bold & James, we acquired Titus, Digital Guardian, Cobalt Strike, ClearSwift, Tripwire, Outflank, just to name a few. And we brought all these together in a specific platform that would allow an organisation to understand what their key critical data assets were, how they were managed, how they were secured, how they were looked after, and how they were shared, and also through the life cycle of the document through our digital rights management product, how they were controlled and could ultimately be brought back. So that's how we were put together specifically. Putting these products together will enable you to create your evidence, the risk register that Vivian talked about. One of the frustrating things I think, if I was in your chair, is who considers themselves to be compliant? Just a quick show of hands. You can do it like that if you don't want to put your hand up, because nobody considers them. Oh, right, cool. Come and see us then. What are you trying to be compliant in? Jesus. Well. There you go. I mean, I'm compliant to Jesus. I'm not going to go. I'm in Ireland. I know where I am, right? I'm not going to start talking about religion, right? So NIS2. Is anybody trying to be compliant to NIS2 or DORA? You don't have to put your hands up, because I know people don't want to share. You can just do that little nod in your eyes. One of the problems is you don't get a certificate. When you've done it, oh yeah, you get to go to the board and say, this is all my evidence. And your board, because they will tend to be people that aren't as expert as you, will say things like, well, am I secure yet? Are we good? And you're going to go, no. And then what do I need to do? Well, spend a bit more money, because that's what we say, right? Spend more money to be compliant. That's the only way. And you're going to keep going through this, and it's such a difficult spot for people in your profession to try and do, because so many people that I talk to consider themselves to be compliant. But the truth of the matter is, having this stuff won't stop your data getting stolen. It won't stop user error. So you've just got to do your best, and they're still going to take it out on you as cybersecurity professionals if things go wrong. I'm going to move on and just talk quickly about a couple of case studies really quickly. This is what I was mentioning earlier. This was a large, you probably see the planes, the F-35. This is a project that we did this is in Germany, and they're building the F-35 in Germany, but they've got to get all the data from America, all the plans in a secure method, and then they're going to build it there. But the US Data Act again, they've got to be able to show all the way through, everything's secure in these plans, all the way to the end, and then they've got to be able to show how they can extract it all at the end. So we put together a series of our products in order to do this, a managed file transfer engine, a web gateway, data classification, and a DLP tool, all put together to show it complied and fit their FedRAMP and STANAG status. So this is the kind of thing that we do. Also, we also do offensive tools. So not just defending, we also have got an OnDemand company that puts together, allows your cybersecurity teams, your red teams, to actually use some of the tools, some of the tactics that the bad guys, the nefarious actors do, and put together to basically practice and test to see if all the things that you've done are working in a suitable way to make sure that you're protected. Cool. That's me. That's
Brilliant.
it. So,
Well done.
I hope it didn't scare anyone. I hope it was useful.
Yeah, just before you go, is there any questions from anybody? That was very interesting. I've one for you, I suppose, for your clients, your defence clients. What cyber threats are they more worried about? What's keeping them awake at night? They're not CISOs, so what's keeping them awake?
There's a mix, to be honest with you. Some of them are soldiers, and some of them are civilian CISOs. So it's a lot of the stuff that's keeping these people. It's always, is the data classified in the right way? Are all points covered? So that in the way that the world's evolved recently, you know, think about drones. Every single image that is taken for the military needs to be classified, and then it needs to be decided where that can be sent and how that's forwarded on. So if they don't have classification and data loss prevention tools in place, then they can't do that properly. But the parallels are the same. They're key critical data assets, and who can have access to them based on. The good thing about the military, which is an easy thing to sell to, and the police, they've been classifying in paper for the longest time. So moving them into a structure where it was around IT is pretty easy.
Excellent. Did I see someone else there? Yeah, run over here. Thanks, Chris Moore.
Hi, thanks. That was a good presentation. So this whole thing of sovereignty and European sovereignty versus the US turning stuff off is a real
Yes.
area of concern. Where do you see companies like Amazon and Microsoft? I mean, they're talking about European versions of those companies. Where do you see that going and happening? Is that in our future?
So I think those two companies that you called out, I think they'll go wherever the money is, and they'll do whatever they believe is the right thing to ensure that they can ensure the money. I mean, it's interesting when you talk about those companies about how they move the money around once they've took it and how the banking system is put together. It's back to the first comments I made. They'll create a system that looks like it applies to the EU and we're comfortable, but currently in a head-to-head fight between the US government and the EU, invariably the US government wins, currently. I think some of the stuff that the US government has done recently, which I think is good, by the way, has led for more European-led purchasing, has led for organisations trying not to be as reliant on the US for so much stuff, and it should ultimately drive innovation. I think with companies like Amazon, they're so entrenched and what they've got is so huge, it would be so difficult for European companies to try and build and create parallel infrastructures. And part of the problem is our companies are built by entrepreneurs, right, who want to be rich. So when Amazon comes and goes, how'd you like 100 mil for your company that turns over 10? Most people are taking it. So every time we get down the line of doing something, money talks, unfortunately, or fortunately for the owners.
Someone wants to give me 100 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else got a question? Do you want to add it into that last piece? Because it was very much overlapping.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's say from a data perspective, when we're talking about Microsoft and AWS, for example, they have a big push on data residency, and that's their terminology that they're using because they can't deliver sovereignty. I think there's starting to be an appetite from the wider market where they are going to have to ask themselves serious questions around how they can address sovereignty. You look at the French government moving all services away from American providers. It's a monumental move. I still don't know how on earth they're going to do it, but that's seismic, really, in terms of the story we're telling. So I think if more companies were to follow, okay, then it's going to really pose some questions to them. But as things stand at the moment, with the US Data Act as it is, they won't be able to provide a sovereign solution. I think the way the market is going generally is that obviously people adopted hyperscalers initially, and there's been a lot of bad chat about hyperscalers, but they've done a fantastic job in enabling companies, getting companies access to multiple different clouds, platforms and use cases, which is fantastic. But I think we're now moving away from a hyperscaler, Microsoft, AWS, one-size-fits-all model, and perhaps more to a more tailored and independent solution where you pick your cloud provider, you pick your email provider, you pick your chat provider, all individually based on the attributes that each of those independent companies have, and you actually build your own, multi-cloud solution as opposed to a single vendor. But I'm really excited. It's very interesting to see where they will go with this because it's a huge market shift at the moment in Europe. Thanks.
Is there someone else down there with a question? No? No? Any questions for any of us? No? We have one here in front. Thanks.
My question is actually more broadly around the small to medium enterprise, which is sort of a lot of Ireland. So NIS2 will probably be too heavy for a lot of those. What are the really important security standards going to be for the next 12, 18 months for SMEs in Ireland?
Will I take this one?
Yeah.
Or we can all add to it. So it depends on what the SME is for. So if the SME is an ICT provider to a critical company, they're going to have NIS2. If they provide some services to financial regulators, they don't need to be DORA, but they're going to be potentially contractually obliged to have some of those strong security controls in place. A good benchmark start is potentially ISO 27001. A lot of people are starting to think it's just a checkbox exercise, but if you do take it seriously and actually build on top of that, that's a good one for a small company. The NIST, that's a good framework as well to align to as well. So a lot of smaller companies would say, I'm aligned to a framework, even though they may not have to be compliant. Obviously, the GDPR piece, they have to be. Again, that's about making sure that you know how to report, that your data is secure. So again, as I mentioned earlier on, they do overlap, a lot of them. A lot of them cost a lot of money. So for smaller companies, as long as they have their basics right, they have, the key pillars right, they should be able to get there. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I think my view on this is I think there's a tension that you alluded to between capability and money. I think there's some really good organisations downstairs, some managed service providers that can help. And I think it also depends, what does this SME do as to how much they're willing to commit from what they're doing to protect themselves. And then also the SME attitude to risk, because the truth of the matter is it is very expensive, and at the end of the day you still won't be compliant. So it's the cyber risk versus the business risk and what you're willing to withstand, I think. Anything to add?
And just even to add from the contractual piece, obviously I deal a lot in digital forensics investigations as well. We are seeing a massive increase in MSPs being sued by customers where they have lost their data or where there has been invoice redirection or malware infiltrating through their network and causing issues for the customer. They're now going back to the contracts, and the contracts are very, very loose in that, oh, we're going to be your MSP, but it doesn't specifically say you have to have MFA in there. So they're all now going, well, you should have had it because you're responsible, but then there's the legal argument. So legally, it's starting to get a bit more exciting, as I say. There's a lot of there's a lot of arguments going on in the courts, and then of course the judges are finding it very difficult to take sides. They barely know usernames and passwords at this point. So,
Thank you.
hopefully there's no judges there.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I appreciate that the threat in the room is probably more one of boards being sued through lack of compliance. But thinking more broadly about the threat and the risk, do you think there's a difference between compliance and actually being secure? And what advice would you recommend that we give to people? And when do you think that would be a good time to have those conversations?
I can go first. I think so. One of the businesses we do is penetration testing. We've got a piece of software that you can penetrate. And when you've had as anyone knows, when you've had a penetration test, it was fine yesterday. You don't know what's happened today, right? So it's incredibly difficult. And we often, I'll give you a bit of insight as when we're selling. Sometimes if a customer has a use case, a genuine use case that they're trying to deal with, that's a better customer for me because they're motivated, they understand what the problem is, and they want to fix something. If somebody is just trying to achieve tick box compliance, by the nature of it, they're trying to go for the minimal spend possible. So they could argue to their board they are compliant, but in the reality of it, they've just gone through the lowest level of motion to be able to say that rather than actually be invested. And if anybody is working in an organisation that is just getting tick box level compliance, I would say when it goes wrong, they'll blame you, would be my thoughts.
From a data point of view, I really agree with what you're saying there in terms of choosing function over a certification. From a data's perspective, I think it's about making decisions that safeguard you and your decision. You can justify how you've made your decision in terms of the security of your company. So being able to choose how your data is secured ensuring your data is encrypted, for example. So you've done all you can in terms of adopting an air gap solution with encryption, making sure you've got a solution that it's got versioning and object lock, okay, to make sure that you've got data that isn't going to be able to be to access with any sort of threat scenarios. But making decisions based on function rather than a tick box certification from our perspective. So function over form.
Not to repeat what the guys have said, we all know organisations that are compliant that have had cybersecurity breaches. So I think it speaks for itself without saying compliance is nonsense. Any other questions? Oh, go on, Maria.
Yeah, I'm surprised we didn't talk about AI compliance that much. So how do you see AI being compliant, and how do you see it being GDPR compliant and sovereign in terms of usage of it?
Massive use case at the moment, isn't it? Is around all of these data machines and engines that we're using. They all require data to be able to learn and access from. I think that's another week-long discussion on that side of things. But again, in terms of putting guardrails, okay, and geofencing the data that you hold as a company is really important so that your AI tools are accessing your data, okay? Again, it goes around compliance, but ensuring that data is sat within your geographic area is really important because that minimizes the access from external threats. Providing full immutability Okay, so again, if you're just looking to lock down that data and in terms of preventing that data being accessed by any other AI tools, then that's another fantastic way of doing it as well. But it's AI and compliance, I think, it's a massive whole other story.
Yeah, no, but if you think about it, it's just another tool. AI is another tool. So it used to be the cloud, it used to be the internet. We all had to get controls, we all had to make sure that we were safeguarding within those environments. AI is just the next. Now, it's quantum computing now. It's actually even gone beyond AI. But we didn't talk about AI because there's a full AI stream, and we were. But it does definitely come into play with compliance, and really, it's all about your controls. It's the same rules. You have to be compliant. Make sure you know where your data is. Make sure you're secure. Make sure there's no leaks, and so forth.
AI is fantastic. I mean, I'm sure we've all created really funny pictures of our friends and sent them on WhatsApp groups. That seems to be a big use of AI in my golf group. AI is fantastic, and it's going to be used like more and more. One thing I would say is have a proper conversation with your business around how they want AI to be used, what it shouldn't be used for, and just don't neglect the human element, because there's so many cases at the moment of just individuals loading up sensitive data into AI. And once it's in there, it's there for everybody, right? In some of these large language models, it's just bizarre, some of the stuff you can ask AI, and it will give you minutiae detail on organizations. So for me, it's the human element that must be controlled with AI.
Any other questions? No, just want to thank the guys. These were very good. Thank you. Very in-depth. Thank you.
That's great.